Hello everyone, and today I'm taking yet another trip into the world of 3-axis electronic gimbals. I'm looking at the Moza Air 2, their newest flagship gimbal. Most of you will know by now what electronic gimbals are and how amazingly useful and important they are for semi-professional and even professional video makers. They come in different sizes and capabilities, and they're essentially a Steadicam system for your mirrorless or digital SLR camera. If you want to do handheld video work with smooth-looking, professional footage, then an image stabilization system in your camera or lens can help a little, but if you want real swooping movements and smooth footage as you're walking or even running, then an electronic gimbal is for you. I'd like to thank Moza for sending me a sample of this gimbal for review, although as usual, this is a totally independent video. This new offering from Moza is one of the bigger gimbals on the market, but its price is fairly reasonable, costing about £500 in the UK or around $600 in the US. It can carry and work with a camera and lens combination up to an astonishing 4.2 kilograms. Although the gimbal itself is a little heavy, at 1.4 kilograms, you'll want to be in fairly good shape if you want to shoot with this thing for long periods of time. Well, firstly, let's look at the gimbal's build quality. It comes in a tough but flexible carry case, which is thoughtfully compartmentalized. It comes complete with a tripod attachment for the bottom, which is very sturdy and tough with rubberized tips, useful. You get a variety of wires in this little pouch for attaching the gimbal to a huge number of different cameras. I'll show you a chart at the end of the video for compatibility. Non-compatible cameras can be mounted to the gimbal too, by the way, you just won't be able to directly control them. You also get very powerful batteries, not the kind that you can just buy off the shelf, and a dedicated battery charger. The charger works from USB-C power, so you can plug it into any USB-C charger. However, this gimbal does not come with a two-handed grip, you have to buy that separately. Considering the gimbal's weight, you might want to think about it. And then, the gimbal itself. As you can see, it's big and heavy, but the fit and finish feel really professional, feeling solid and well made. You attach the camera to it using a plate that's compatible with Manfrotto tripod heads. In fact, it has a double plate system, which is clever, allowing you to quickly reattach your camera without needing to rebalance the entire apparatus, well, unless you changed your lens. You balance it like normal for an electronic gimbal in the 4 different places. There are loads of instruction videos out there on YouTube if you'd like to learn how. It's pretty easy and takes just a couple of minutes. I found the adjustment points a little bit easier to tweak than on the Zhiyun Crane 2 gimbal. The best way to tell if your camera is balanced well is to tap it around and see if it stays in position. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but it reduces strain on the motors if your setup is balanced well. And once you are all balanced, like this camera here, hold down the video record button, which is also the on-off button, and away you go. The gimbal's battery is supposed to last 16 hours, that's a pretty impressive amount of use. On turning it on, you immediately notice the miniature OLED screen, a really useful feature that's becoming more common on gimbals now, thankfully, and it shows you all kinds of important information, including your battery level. The way the gimbal works is pretty flexible in that it allows you to select which axis is locked and which allows for movement, and it displays for you each one. You can change which axes are locked by pressing down the joystick once, twice or 3 times quickly. And if you lock any of the axes, you can still control them using the thumb control stick. My guest for today is Sonic the Hedgehog, who's going to help us see the gimbal's performance a little bit. So here's the gimbal when everything is switched to follow mode. And I'm pleased with the performance here. I'm moving it quite quickly, but it's pretty happy smoothing out all my twists and turns, despite having a medium-sized camera and lens mounted on. You can adjust the follow sensitivity very easily by turning the dial around the menu button, so that's useful. Here's some footage if you lock the panning, so we see a nice sidestepping effect here. Now I've locked the tilt and roll axes so it stays on a nice even level, requiring you to physically move your camera up and down. You'll probably end up using this mode pretty often. And now, here's some footage with all the axes locked, the camera locked forward, no matter how you turn it. And finally, here's the quick turn mode, which you can perform by pulling the trigger button 3 times. And you can always recenter the gimbal by pulling the trigger button twice. One of my favourite features of the gimbal is the appropriately titled Inception mode. If you press the function button twice quickly, then the gimbal flips forward and you can spin it around using the joystick. If you point it at your subject carefully, it can spin at 10 different speeds, which is an awesome effect. It takes practice to stay centered on your subject though. Whether or not your camera is wired into the gimbal, there's a little menu screen you can access with various options for making all kinds of speed and calibration adjustments, as well as telling your gimbal what camera you're working with if you want to plug the gimbal in for extra control. It's a bit easier to do this though using an app on your phone, as you might expect. The Moza Master app connected my phone to the gimbal with no problems, giving you remote-controlled access to move the gimbal around, and quite precisely, also enabling to start and stop recording and take photos if you plugged your camera into the gimbal. You can also adjust all kinds of settings within the gimbal using the app, and see its status quite easily. Also, various time-lapse options are available, which I'll be exploring more closely in the future, and you can adjust those pretty precisely too, although the app itself is a little complicated to use for this. Now, if you plug this gimbal into your camera using the correct one of the leads provided, then a number of different options are open to you for controlling the camera via the gimbal menu, and that's useful and becoming a pretty commonplace feature nowadays. As you can see from the following chart, you get great compatibility and features with Canon and Nikon cameras, and reduced controls with Sony cameras, but the gimbal can help a Sony camera to recharge though, piggybacking off its own powerful batteries. So finally, how well does it work as a gimbal? Overall, I found that the gimbal did a very good job in smoothing out walking patterns so long as you walk carefully, and learning to walk the right way is a little bit of a trick here. You want to resist the temptation to whip the gimbal around or tilt it up and down quickly. The best footage you'll get is when you pan around slowly and carefully. I especially like that you can slow the follow modes down for a smoother experience in panning and tilting. That's really useful. Take a look at this footage for yourself to get the best idea. Overall, I'd say this is actually one of the smoothest electronic gimbals I've tested so far. It gives brilliantly fluid results. It's a good option with a lot of fancy features to it that tech heads and full-time videographers will really appreciate, especially if you give it a little time to learn its intricacies. My one criticism is that it does take a little while to learn how to use all the different button combinations and whatnot. It does take practice. But the fact that it just handles and works so well is the main thing for me, so it comes recommended.